Hi, everyone. I'm Agree,
I'm Harrison.
and we got another episode of Bottom Line Design for you. This time with Maigen Thomas, who is the founder of Level 11 Technology, which I love your description of it as I think you called it a training hospital
It's a,
for
yeah, a teaching hospital. Yeah.
a teaching hospital. Yeah. For designers, right?
Well, yeah, it's for early career. I like to say digital technologists, but that term hasn't really caught on. So apparently it's just me over here like digital technologist, but anyone who has been to a tech boot camp, essentially. So designers, product managers, project managers, programmers, coders, however you want to think about those dudes who run the code, not only dudes. But yeah, anybody who is building tech and has recently learned how to do the job. I'm trying to build an agency where I can pay them to get their first year of experience as they kind of learn how to do what you do.
So obviously there's your entire life before this happened. Why don't you tell us a little about those beginning days?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is one of my favorite stories, and it does tie directly to why I'm building this business and why I'm building it as I'm building it. So my origin story, I'm also a career changer. So I have a million miles of compassion because I've walked a million miles in the same shoes as people who have gone to a tech boot camp in recent years. So I went to a tech boot camp, but I only went to a tech boot camp because I quit being a flight attendant, and I quit being a flight attendant or I started being a flight attendant because I got kicked out of Canada. So like that's the origin story. Is I moved to Canada back in 2003, and it turns out you should pay taxes and fill out paperwork. That is probably the basics for moving to any country. And they were very polite when they kicked me out. And I don't have a 4-year degree. So the reason I was in Canada is because I didn't have a 4-year degree, didn't really have a career. And if we're really honest, I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. So that was the inklings of what can I do? What's possible for me? When I got kicked out of Canada, I was on monster.com. This is 2008. If you remember, monster.com still existed. And I was in the airport for 12 hours. And I became a flight attendant because Delta happened to be hiring, and I spoke a little bit of French. And I flew for 5.5 years, loved it, spoke a little bit of about 20 different languages, went to 46 countries, filled an entire passport with stamps and visas, had a really phenomenal time, and then met someone and wanted to not necessarily settle down, but I wanted some more stability. Being a flight attendant is the opposite of having a stable schedule. And my partner at the time was a network engineer, kind of like a real super nerd, and makes the connections and makes all the magic happen. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. All I have, I think, the qualifications for are serving Diet Coke and peanuts in the sky. And I actually just recorded a one of my favorite talks the other day about you are the MVP of your future self. And when I was feeling like I had nothing to offer other than Diet Coke and peanuts in the sky, I that's also a MVP moment. So depending on what you heard when I said MVP, you might have thought most valuable player. Nice. But I also consider that to be like the minimum viable product kind of in tech, where you're like, hey, this is the most iterable version of you. So I was at my MVP, minimum viable product moment, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to a tech boot camp. I did a 4-month, which in retrospect seems so short, but I did a 4-month full stack boot camp here in Portland, Oregon. I learned how to set up MySQL and run web apps and a little bit of front end development, but mostly it was back end, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails. I learned how to do all of that stuff. And I got my first job in the industry because someone took a chance on me. And they had no real incentive to do so, kind of like we're seeing right now with a bunch of people coming out of tech boot camps. There's not a lot of established apprenticeship or even internship. There's some big companies that have internship programs, but it's not like they're actively seeking out juniors to nurture and build into great designers or great developers. So the reason I created this is because I also taught I don't want to say semesters, three cohorts of the UC Berkeley UX UI bootcamp. I was recruited because I was already a designer in the industry, and I fell in love with it. Like, honestly, I fell in love with teaching and didn't realize how much I loved connecting with early career designers and helping them figure out, what does a career look like in this world? So they had 6 months in the cohorts that I taught. We had a few weeks of UX research and a little bit of UX design. They did an individual project during that time. They did a group-based project after that. Then we did information architecture and visual design. They did another group project, and then we did web development. So like, I have all of this knowledge, all of these skills, and yet I saw out of, let's see, there was like 30 plus 60. So I had at least 150 students myself go through this boot camp. And then I also did a lot of subbing and teaching for other cohorts and other schools. And I just don't see them getting hired. I don't see them. I see maybe 5% of the cohorts getting a job. And it's not that they're not qualified. It's just that there's not a lot of chances out there for them to show up and say, I have the ability to do this. But yeah, it takes me a little bit longer. I kind of crammed all this information in over the course of 6 months, and I need to figure out what this is like in the real world. So I created a teaching hospital. So very Grey's Anatomy. These are people who will make mistakes. These are people who don't yet know how to hand off or how to do proper stakeholder interviews, or even really how to work effectively in a team that's delivering a product over more than 3 weeks. So I think that they deserve an opportunity, just like I was given an opportunity, and I want to create that opportunity for them. So give me a second to breathe.
Yeah. So when I think back to like boot camps, especially like technical boot camps, like I think there's like Hack Reactor, Lambda School, like there's a few out there, right? Yeah. That's for software engineering. That is very, very, it has a much higher percentage of hiring. Why is it that, how did you land on designers? And was it because maybe like there was the most amount of opportunity there because the percentage of hiring at the end of each cohort was just so low, or what else was motivating you?
Ooh, that's a really good question, because it's a lot of different things. One is I kind of push back against the company that I worked for, which is 2U. They bought edX and then took the name. There wasn't a lot of, what's the word? Not a lot of discernment, basically. And this is kind of what I'm seeing across a lot of boot camps right now. So coding is a pretty hard skill. Like, everything is kind of documented. Yeah, you might have to make different technologies talk to one another that didn't, somebody didn't set up that integration before. But for the most part, it's Googleable. You can find it. Like, ChatGPT can help you in a lot of ways, but design is very intuitive. There's a design eye that people claim to have, and I'm not going to be one who claims to have that. I'll tell you that right now. It's intuitive. It is personal. It is subjective. There are some standards, but those are non-specific. They aren't necessarily applicable from like this application to this one over here, like from an e-commerce to a nonprofit. Like, maybe there's some crossover, and that's just website. Then there's apps, and then there's, the whole of everyone's experience of anything. Like, everything is UX, is what I like to say. So what I noticed was that we didn't have any sort of qualification to get in. If you could pay the amount of money it costs to get into the boot camp, you're allowed in. So I liked to call admissions more like sales, and not really like qualifying whether or not you're going to be successful. So there were certain people who came in, and I don't mean like a specific number, like I couldn't name names, but there's a percentage that come in that have no real context for what design does in a tech industry. Then there are some people who come in and they've got like a fine arts degree or some kind of advanced education. So there's like some who don't have any education. Maybe they've got high school, some college, maybe they haven't taken any college classes at all. So we're lacking knowledge of the real world and the basic application of design in some senses. Then there's folks who have had a real job. They've had a professional experience and they don't really have the design experience, but they understand what UX is. So if there's 60 people in a class, then there are 60 different possible backgrounds that they might come from that may or may not make them set up for success. Like, I'm trying to think of my words and I want to use them carefully because I don't want to diminish anyone's potential. There is a lot to be said for people who are hungry to learn and have that kind of leaning towards the expert generalist of like, ooh, I learned something. How do I apply it to other things that I know? And there's a curiosity that needs to be cultivated. And like, not everybody is set up for the same. So these people who've gone through boot camps have been promised that like, oh yeah, no, you are totally going to get the information that you need in 6 months. And there are jobs waiting for you. And there are not jobs waiting for you, especially if you don't have like a certain amount of aptitude in any one of 20 something areas. And that's like just taking a number out of nowhere, out of thin air. But just knowledge of the tech industry, knowledge of what development can do, knowledge of what design has an impact on, knowledge of marketing, knowledge of business in general. Why would a business be in existence? All of these things together, it makes it really difficult for you to say that this is actually going to be successful. Honestly, I think UX is the hardest tech boot camp because it's made to seem like the easiest.
I think that like one of the things that you're getting across here is that at least like one of the things that I'm perceiving is like that seniority is something that is more perceived or felt than it is actually seen. Like it's not like so much like it's like they get on a call and it's almost like you can just kind of see um it almost like kind of like walking in high heels is its own like skill set that's like walking, but it's like a different thing, and you can tell when someone is, you know,
Good or not good at
yeah,
it.
yeah,
How
how comfortable,
wobbly are your ankles?
yeah, how well, exactly. Like, and I certainly feel like,
Are you walking in New York over the air vents of the subway? Like,
yeah,
Oh,
right,
you're
God, do you know that you can't set your heels down on an air
yeah,
vent and
exactly.
honestly avoid them entirely? Yeah, this is a great
Yeah,
analogy, actually. I'm loving this.
yeah. And I think that like that's something you definitely can tell on a call within like a few minutes is like not just do they know the lingo, are they comfortable in their deployment of it? Like it's like you can't even put your finger on it, but
Yes.
it shines through. Of
Yeah.
like, yeah, is this someone who's gonna be able to get plopped in and they'll know what's kind of going on from day one, hour one, or is it gonna be the kind of thing where it's like, oh well, when we say T-shirt size on a ticket, we don't literally mean a T-shirt. You know, we mean
Right.
will it
They
take
have
a
no
week?
concept of what this means either. So, like, they
Yeah,
need experience in all of this. And a 6 month program where we're cramming information down your throat as fast as possible is useful for some people. And for others, they're like, I need to understand how this works. I need to watch it in action. And that's why I think this apprenticeship model is the right way to go for technology juniors. And I don't just mean that for designers or developers. I think it's for everyone. I mean, I literally have an electrician. I have an electrician in my house right now who has a journeyman with him. They have to do 4 years. And that is to make sure you don't blow up somebody's house or yourself. We make sure that you understand all of the different parts and the different applications. Like, this is not the same level of danger. No designer is getting electrocuted on the job. I'm like, knock on wood. Nobody's getting electrocuted on the job, but you still need to understand and be able to ask stupid questions. The things that you think are stupid questions are just because you don't have context for them. And you deserve to be around people who are not like, ugh, how dare you not know, which when you're on a high performing team, they don't have time to slow down and be like, okay, sweetie, let me tell you about t-shirt sizing. And like, gosh, now I'm forgetting the poker where it's like, we use the different numbers. That really throws designers for a loop. The t-shirt sizing is one thing. And then the poker points, planning
like,
poker. That's what it is.
like the 1, 3, 5, 7 Fibonacci.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, they don't know what a Fibonacci sequence is. And I only knew that from development. And like as a designer, no one's ever mentioned
Bingo.
it. But
Yeah.
right. So like all of these things. And I think like a year is the bare minimum. I'm setting myself up for a year, but I'm anticipating having multiple levels where people are like, actually, I want to stick around and learn more. I could go out and get a junior job somewhere, but I hope to be the kind of employer that they're like, nah, we'd rather hang out with Maigen.
It does sound like a lot of it is just very like tactile advice, but it also sounds
Yeah.
a lot like you're training mini founders.
I would That would probably be like, that's not even a dream I have, but like if that happens, that means that they've learned enough that they feel confident to go, yeah, I think I can actually do this and build something bigger than myself. And like that, you just actually gave me like a thrill. I think I almost blacked out for a second because I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could inspire founders, that is the most flattering thing I can even imagine. I think I would cry. I literally would. That is so amazing to think about. Like the fact that y'all are here to work with founders and talk about how they build businesses. I love this.
I mean, like just listening to the way that you're talking about it, just seems like you're teaching people how to be resourceful and how to
Yes.
quickly adapt.
That is literally the thing that makes me the unicorn that people enjoy working with. And I say that like with real tongue in cheek, like it's tech unicorn, but like I have business knowledge, I have marketing knowledge, I have development knowledge. Like I love coming in to be a senior designer and they're like, well, we can't make that. I'm like, let me show you. I bet I could make a rough little prototype out of code and you'd be like, dang it, how'd she do that?
And you came in from being
A flight attendant.
yeah, it's
Making
like
programming nothing more complicated than the onboard oven to cook 20-minute meals. Like that's literally it. And I'm like, oh, who knew? I could do code. This is crazy.
are you finding that are you finding that students that you're working with are developing in the ways that you anticipated, or are they developing in ways that you didn't anticipate that are now inspiring how you teach new cohorts?
So that is a really good question. Yeah, I had like two complex answers showed up in my brain at the same time. So one of them, yes. Based on what I have taught previous cohorts when I was teaching specific curriculum, and I would update that curriculum for my cohort of students. Like honestly, I would spend 4 hours to prepare for a 4-hour class because I'm like, oh, this is outdated. This is outdated. Let me update this language. Just as I could update and give them better information, I would. And so I always apply that to the next time I teach. I mean, in fact, the process that I teach for evaluating websites right now, which is like my only service, I evaluate websites for accessibility. That's it. But also at the same time, it's usability and marketability and viability, just to give you some information on like, hey, is your page landing with your customers? Because if it's not, then it doesn't matter how accessible the page is. So what I teach, I've been teaching to this spreadsheet that I've been refining over the last year, and I've gotten some amazing feedback from accessibility specialists. So like each time I do it, I've refined it more and more. So you asked, are my current students like changing how I'm approaching teaching the next cohort? We are so early in level 11 technology. I only have 5 apprentices right now, and they're not even full-time apprentices. I can't pay them full-time yet. That is the goal. But what, like, oh gosh, I'm like verklempt just saying this, but like I'm looking for my first our level 11's first paying client by the end of July is the goal. So I've been working with a couple of nonprofits so far, and I actually have, at last glance, 78 people signed up for going through my small business, teaching themselves, like looking at their website. I created a course for it. And the anticipation is that they're going to go, oh, this is a lot of information, but I'm not sure that I actually got all of the accessibility issues. And so that becomes like lead generation for my company. So I'm actually hoping that will be in the next couple of weeks. I will find out if they are interested in being my first client.
What's the
I'm like,
Yeah.
what's the biggest blocker, and why not grow faster than that? Why not timeline?
Super good question. A couple of people have asked me, like, why would you not, now that you've really got your process dialed in, why would you not grow faster? And it's because I'm growing very intentionally. I actually just had a call with another founder the other day. Not going to say who, because it was based on some interesting and kind of contentious information in the industry, but I have a lot of compassion for them because they did try to grow really fast. And what it sounds like is that they're losing money every month because they're trying to over deliver at scale. And I want this to be extremely sustainable. So building this business, I invested $5,000 of my own money, and my investor, my partner, thankfully, hashtag sponsored, JK, he invested about 20,000 so far. So I've got $25,000 investment, and I believe that this industry, what I want to do is actually sustainable. So I've consulted with some COOs who have actually built an agency like this before, where they basically like took people off the street. And I'm not meaning like, grabbed a dude out of a tent, but like someone who did not have any previous information, taught them a process, and then worked with clients. In fact, the COO of Catalyte, I use their Nike case study as an example of a really good case study for like keeping it real marketing focused and not trying to drown people in details. But that's what they built the entire company on. And like people will say, and this is something that I have to be emotionally okay with, because my advisors, I have a few, are like, people are going to blow this off as a lifestyle business. And I'm like, yes, fine. It's a lifestyle business. It's a service business. It's not sexy. It is not inventing the wheel. It is not doing anything super fun and new, but it'll throw off several $1,000,000 after a few years. And I am excited about that. More importantly, I will be able to pay people an equitable, a fair and equitable wage. My goal is to, by the middle of next year, pay all of my apprentices a salary of $70,000 each, no matter where they are. So like, I obviously like San Francisco Bay Area, that's not going to be amazing. But for people, especially in lower cost of living areas and less privileged areas, which is my goal. So I'm hoping that this is going to be an equitable and sustainable business that delivers better accessible websites and ideally works with government agencies so that we can make their websites suck just a little bit less and also give people real world experience while they get paid.
You had mentioned in our pre-call these notions around ethical hiring. Can you speak to that a little bit more? There was actually a term that you used that is escaping me right now.
Oh, yeah.
And it was really juicy. I was like, we got to talk about that more.
Oh
But
my gosh.
I can't think about it.
Yeah,
I
saw,
can't
I'm
think
drawing
of
a blank on it too, but yeah, dive into that some.
Like, what
Yeah.
does that
So my
mean?
hiring, sorry,
Yeah.
what?
No, I was just asking, like, what does it mean to like hire ethically? Like, when I think about it, it's like, do you have enough runway to treat this person fairly? Do you have enough context to set them up for success?
Yeah.
Are you bridging, their department with all the stakeholders so that they get kicked off in the right way? But
Yeah.
maybe it's something different. Like, what is that?
Okay. So what I think you're asking about is like, how do I plan to hire my apprentices? So there's two folds to that. Is one, I have noticed, and this is my own perception, like I got into the tech industry because this sounds weird, but like my grandma passed and left me $10,000, and my brain says grandparents love education, so I should do something with this that is education related. And that's how I paid for my boot camp. So I made an investment, but only because I had this money from my grandmother that made that education possible, and that has set up this career where when I was a flight attendant, my best taxable year was $33,000, and in tech, like 10 years later, my best year has so far been like 170,000, something like that. Like that is a significant lifestyle change, and my perception of what impact I could make on this world has changed as a result of it. So my goal is to bring more of the marginalized communities into tech. Like we laughed a couple of years ago because, as there's like themes that go through, like ours was UX so white. We have like 4% of designers of color. And that feels pretty low. And that's how we end up with hand soap dispensers and hand dryers that can't recognize melanated skin. So like we need more people of color in the room. So my goal is to get more money in the hands of Black and brown people, women, LGBTQ folks, and the neurodivergent and disabled. So because I'm building an accessibility first agency, I'm looking to hire people who are neurodivergent and I am also autistic. I have ADHD. I present really, really well. And that's because I've been masking for my whole life. So I'm really good at this. I'm also really good at in video. Like in person, I'd be stumbling over my over my tongue. But my goal is to get more money in the hands of these folks. And I said, primarily Black and brown people and women and LGBTQ. It's not specifically in that order, but it is basically like, let's bring in the voices that are not typically heard, which is what I was talking about with this other founder. And they even said at the end of the conversation, if I could give you any one piece of advice, it would be don't scale too quickly, because they took, what is that money? Funding. They did in fact get funding, and it has kind of really cramped the style of serving the communities that they want to serve, because they have such like requirements to meet. So it creates a lot of stress. These folks that I want to hire. Oh yeah.
Like, what do you say to that dense founder or hiring manager that's like, well, we're open to everything, we just hire for talent? When in actuality, the leading thought partners in those areas are like, no, you have to look at your entire organization differently. Like, if you don't introduce, like, the ways that we're currently measuring talent today don't necessarily apply to the LGBT community, the Black community, these marginalized neurodivergent communities. The current criteria that we use today to hire was actually born from one persona, white men. Like, how do you address that? Like, how do you like buck up against that?
That's such a great question. If someone would just say that to me, like super directly, like, we've hired these people because they have fit a typical mold, or they fit our culture or whatever, I'd be like, that's cool, except you're probably missing out and you don't feel like you are. And that's okay. So maybe they're not necessarily my target market for like getting my apprentices hired into. But I think more and more people are recognizing that the more variety of voices in the room, the more successful you are. And it really also depends on like who you're marketing to. Like, it is really difficult to say whether or not like an all specifically flavored team is only going to deliver excellence for one specific persona. I don't know that that's actually like a thing, but I do believe that the more voices that are in the room and the more voices that feel empowered to be heard is important. I know I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I've had if someone didn't take a chance to say, hold on, let Maigen speak. Like, what was your idea? And I've had some really good impact as a result of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I mean, I think that like there's like the diversity of voices as like a way of like making sure that you don't develop like institutional blind spots is like I think really, really important. And then also simultaneously like the flip side of that is like figuring out how to also hit consensus or convergence quickly so that everybody can like row or execute in the same direction. And I think it's like, yeah, it feels to me like a lot of the discourse on this very big and important conversation has like not fully worked itself out in its entirety, if that makes any sense. There's like, yeah, it's like it's important to get right, and I also think it's like really hard to get right.
I think the reason that we're not getting it right goes back to what you asked a couple of minutes ago, which is, are we hiring the right people in the right way in order to set them up for success? And even if they are from just a different life experience, like, how are we making sure that their value is like brought to the front and can shine? And I think part of the problem is we don't have great tech hiring practices. We've been pretty standard for a lot of years, and some people have branched out. And I know we've got some companies like Teal and a few others that are trying to help companies who are hire the right people. But like, I don't think we've actually determined what makes that right. What is that right fit? So one of the things I'm hoping to do through the process of building level 11 technology, which I also should tell you, like, I'm not just working on tech skills. I'll tell you that in a second, but I want to help our industry get better at determining who is a good fit, regardless of what like they look like and they talk like and what their background is from, and whether or not they're neurodivergent and need accessibility assistant. Oh gosh, I'm losing the word, but whether they need accommodations, something like that. I think it's because we don't have any sort of practices across the industry that help us go, oh, it's no problem if you can't do X, Y, and Z. We've got the ability to support you no matter what. And I think part of that is figuring out, like, what does talent look like these days? We've been pretty standard. Like, let's be real, the surrounding area of SFO is like, I don't know, like, I got my friend, I'll bring my friend in. We're building new companies all the time, but they are going to grow and they are going to get more global. So being able to bring in that diverse talent and know that it will actually like enhance your team and not just cause friction, I think is important. And so I'm going to actually like segue into, here's the other part that I'm excited about for level 11 technology. So like a boot camp and even like a higher education experience, there's only so much you can teach them, right? There's only so much that they can process without having that real world experience. So have you seen the show? I really hope you have, because y'all are founders and you're in this world. Have you seen the show Billions?
Yeah, of course.
Billions. All right. Wendy Rhodes. I have a Wendy Rhodes. I have a performance coach. I call him my positivity coach, but he's essentially a performance coach. And this is what I also want to provide for my apprentices. So performance coaching, getting your mindset right, making sure that you understand that you earned being here and you bring value. I want to do business etiquette classes. How do you know what to do when you need to have a business dinner with a potential client? Do you get there? Do you know that you should get there a little ahead of time and have a chat with the waiter, the maitre d', select a couple of wines, a red and a white, so that like the decision-making process doesn't impact the flow of the dinner. And like having this knowledge of how to behave in certain situations, like that's all etiquette. That's not something that they teach you in school. That's something a mentor might teach you. But how do you find that person? So yeah. So I want to have like holistic professional development so that not only are these people who a lot of them are coming from retail work, warehouse work, and are making this massive investment in themselves so that they can better their future and provide a family sustaining wage to grow their family and grow their community. But you can't just like pluck somebody out of that and expect them to survive if you throw them, like, I don't know, at Meta or something that is a large company and has expectations for culture. So I want to provide them this holistic training so that they go, oh, it's a little bit more than just like, can you hack on a computer and do the skills, but can you actually perform? Do you know how to communicate? Do you know what a 360-degree review is if that company does that? Do you understand like how to ask good questions if you get in front of the CEO and they're like, hey, what's your name? So like just a lot of different things that only come from other people's experience that I want to bring in and just kind of give a more well-rounded experience. So I'm hoping that by the time 2 years from now rolls around and my first apprentices are really like delivering quality, that then I also become a staffing agency and people are like, oh, we want to hire from level 11 because they've really got that first year experience that is worth a midweight for us. And they get some really good tech. They'll make way more money than they'll make at the apprenticeship agency.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've definitely seen the same thing happen at Numi with like a lot of the designers that come in through the door from like all around the world, where they've got like the raw talent, but maybe they just have not ever spoken with someone who has successfully received several millions of dollars worth of wire transactions in a fundraising round over the course of a few months. That's a very different personality than most people have ever spoken to in their lives, right? And that can be a kind of directness or what might feel overwhelming or whatever, bossy type like personality that like it's like, I'm talented, but I've never interfaced with like that type of personality before. And we found that like literally you can just in a few conversations, right? Like Harrison will have these like kind of almost like a couple coaching sessions with them. Yes. They quickly will just like snap into form.
It also very much comes down to like, do you have that internal grit? Do you have that internal ambition to want to become sticky when it comes to new information your way? Sometimes people just don't have that. And like, that's chill. But like when they do and they're put into a company, like what advice would you have for founders to receive that different type of talent, or what are ways that they should be thinking about accommodating them to get the best out of them, to get their unique voice?
I love this question. I also love that you mentioned that. Had I not had a partner who understand, he's like CTO level. So like he talks about tranches of investors. When have you ever heard the word tranche outside of investment and outside of getting funding? And when would you be exposed to that? Like at what level? So I'm lucky that I've gotten this exposure, but everyone else would come in and be like, I don't know what they're talking about. So having that exposure is helpful. And the best way that a new founder or a small business or even a medium sized business, honestly, can set these people up for success is really thorough onboarding. A company that I worked for last year, or the last couple of years, called Hierology, they did something I was so impressed with. So every time they had new people join the team, every team would do a presentation to take them through, like, here's what product does. Here's the metrics that we look at. Here's what we consider to be a good metric. They describe that ARR and MRR mean annual recurring revenue and monthly recurring revenue. Things people who had never worked for. So two people got hired at the same time as me, had never had work experience. They were out of boot camps and like, what's MRR? So by answering questions so that people don't feel stupid, they feel brought along, they actually get more excited about the business because they're like, oh, now I know what you're talking about, rather than getting 6 months in and going, we've had these monthly meetings and I don't still know what this means. And they just don't ever feel clipped in. So setting them up successfully and going, here's what we sell to, here's our target markets, here's 70% of our income comes from this industry. And we focus on these size companies for this reason. Like giving information and education is the most powerful onboarding, especially to get people excited about what you do and not just like, oh, it's a job.
So when someone is working, they just got hired, and maybe they're from a minority, or is it your advice is for the founders to be a little bit more anticipatory and have a little bit more empathy as they're kind of coming in? What happens when, you know, through no malicious intent, they just forget to do that? Like, what are some principles that they might be able to lean on if they don't have the exact answers?
Some principles of like how to get people up to speed.
How to onboard someone that's maybe outside of their normal pool of talent?
Yeah. I mean, I see it as no matter if even if you've got people who are from marginalized communities who have no exposure to the industry and you're also hiring and everybody's onboarding at the same time, then you've got like someone who's senior who has 20 years in the industry. I still think it's appropriate to do the onboarding, even if it's like we only recorded it once because we don't have time to schedule like new onboarding every 3 weeks for new folks. Totally fine. But making sure everyone goes through the same training is like beneficial for people who have 20 years of experience but are new to the company, and people who have 0 years of experience and are new to the company. Everyone starts with a level playing field. And I feel like it's really respectful to do that, even if someone who's got 20 years and is like, I don't need this, this is a waste of my time. Still, it's still good information. It's still good context, and it sets everyone up for the same questions. And it could even provide the opportunity to do like mentorship. Oh, you started on the same date. You've got 20 years of experience and this person doesn't. Everybody needs time to get spun up in a new role. It depends on how complex the product is, but sometimes at a company, it could take me just a few weeks to get up to speed, but that's unlikely. More like 3 to 6 months, and like 9 months if I was at an AI, not an AI, like a machine learning stuff that I had really never dealt with before. And I was like, I feel so dumb around all these people. And I know I'm really good at what I do. Yeah. Also, yes, thank you. Everything is AI. I'm like, it's ML, but no worries. But yeah, giving everybody that opportunity to get up to speed and not feel stupid. Like that is the basics of what we do in tech, right? We make really complex things and we try to explain them in a way that anyone can understand. And like we should apply that to our employee experience as well as to our new customer acquisition experience as well.
What I mean, like, do you think that that's like a process that only happens in the beginning, or is that something also that like is ongoing? Like, or I don't know, do you have like thoughts on whether there should be like space specifically made for continuing to climatize people in either the industry that they're working in or they're serving as customers, or um, is that something where it's just sort of like making sure that you get it right in the beginning makes it self-sustaining so that like they can actually sponge up all the sort of on the job learnings that they would get from doing the work?
That's a great question. And you've actually just made me at the moment go, now how do I feel about that? So I think a really great start is like going to set you up for long-term success, but making some kind of communication between like the lower level employees and the people who make decisions, like have some kind of communication is essential, especially every few months. I really liked that Hierology was a sales driven organization. So every week we had kind of like a rah, here's where we are in the pipeline. Here's what's going on. Here's how close we are to bonus kind of stuff, like just keeping people informed and able to ask questions and engaged. I loved that they would bring in a different person from around the company to do like a motivational thing. And like literally it was less than 2 minutes. You just pick a quote and then we count down, hoorah, and we go around, go across, the rest of the week. But I thought that was super fun, and it feels appropriate since we already have so many ceremonies like stand-ups and tech. It wouldn't be, out of line to continue to have some things like that where you get to be a little bit more integrated. Another company I liked did donut meetings. It's integrated into Slack, and it like every 4 weeks, it matches you up with someone else to just connect. And some people are interesting. I ran into one guy that just had zero interest in talking to me. I assume he was just extremely busy with other things. And I'm like, that's fine. But out of the 10 that I had total, or more actually, everybody else was like, oh, I never would have met you. I never had any reason to talk to like a technical specialist, like someone who's beyond CS, but not quite on the integrations team. And like someone, I would never have run into them, especially not being in the office. So especially if you've got like a remote first work experience, like getting people to actually talk to other humans is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I've been working from my home for like the last 5 years. So occasionally I do like to talk to humans.
This has been absolutely wonderful. Before we end, is there any plugs you want to make? Any last words of wisdom?
Oh gosh, any last words of wisdom? It would be treat the human first. Like we're all humans first, and we do get really caught up in how tech advanced we are and how exciting all of the stuff is. But remember, like it's a human at the other side of the computer. And I guess my plug is connect with me if you would like to follow this journey. I am building out loud. Everything that I'm doing is open source. I share all my materials and resources. I do a ton of video stuff, and I absolutely love to connect with other people. Like I would love if somehow I can, in a year or two, we have a little regroup and I'm like, oh my gosh, some of your companies who saw this video hired some of the people from level 11, like dream come true. I would cry. I'll turn into like an actual melting statue.
Love that. And on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Cool.
Bye.